After my Commodore years back in the day, I bought a used IBM PS2 Model 50 with the Model M keyboard and transitioned to DOS and Windows based PCs. Over the years PCs got faster and better, but not the keyboards, they just got cheaper and worse. Today we're going to repair, restore and mod a few IBM Model Ms. One of them is new old stock, still in its original box. This is the keyboard that came with the IBM 7496 prototype that 8-Bit Guide made famous on YouTube. Although it's completely unused, it's actually broken from age. Instead of using the well-known bolt mod, we are instead going to try out the screw mod today. We're also going to try out some spare parts and colorful keycaps from Unicomp. Let's start with this oddball here. The Model M was originally manufactured by IBM from 1985 to 1991. Between 1991 and 1996, they were manufactured by Lexmark. When Lexmark discontinued the Model M, IBM kept producing them in Scotland up to 1999. The Model M is actually still manufactured by Unicomp, who bought the rights in 1996. The weird thing about this keyboard is that it's not made by IBM, Lexmark or Unicomp. Instead, this keyboard here has a sticker that says "Made in the US, product of computer tech something." Can't quite read because of the sticker here. I googled this, of course, but I couldn't find anything. This used to be a terminal keyboard, but I have replaced the controller inside, so it now works with a regular PS2. The part number here corresponds to IBM's 3151 series terminals. But those keyboards were manufactured by IBM. The case is weird too. It has cable management back here, like the very late keyboards made in Scotland. But those keyboards had the speaker grill removed. It also has these very long flip-out feet. They are normally half the size. So, a very odd keyboard indeed. I bought this keyboard years ago, advertised as new old stock. And that was sort of true. The keyboard looked unused, but it was very dusty. So it hadn't been stored well. And it also has a faulty backspace. Perhaps the weirdest part of this keyboard is the manufacturing date. According to the label here, it was manufactured the 2nd of October in 2002. My best guess is that someone bought this keyboard new back in 2002. From this weird company, but since it's broken, it was probably never put to use, and instead of sending it back to the supplier, they just put it on a shelf, and that's where it has been sitting until a couple of years ago when it ended up on eBay. Repairing a bad key on a Model M requires a bolt mod, so it totally makes sense that it wasn't fixed back in the day. The fault with this key, I think, is the spring here. If we compare it to the other springs here, it's quite a bit shorter, so it must have been manufactured with one bad spring. Being a terminal keyboard, it has some really bizarre keycaps. I think they're kind of funky, so I left them in. So instead of numlock, we've got jump. Instead of page up, it has clear. Page down is erase EOF. And it just goes on. On the Alt key it has blue legends that say reset and quit. I don't mind it being weird, so I just keep it like this. So to replace the spring here, we need to replace the entire flapper. I bought a few spare years ago. I'm not sure, but I think these white ones came from Unicomp. But if you need one of these, you can easily find one on eBay. However, to replace it, we normally would have to do a bolt mod, but I want to try something different today. Like all Model Ms, this one is gonna need a bolt mod eventually. Oh, that was just completely loose. I didn't use any force at all. That spring just came right off. Let's compare it to one of these. Yeah, it's definitely shorter, about 2 millimeters. And here's a flapper from an original Model M Gen 2. Looks very similar to the white one, but clearly this spring here is shorter. It kind of looks like it has been cut off. Well, whatever happened to the spring, we need to fix it. Now that is not quite as easy as it may sound, because the spring is stuck to the flapper. We can pull it off, But if I try to reattach it, the spring is just going to compress. And it's not going to get stuck to the flapper. So we need to compress that spring somehow, without the spring moving sideways. For that we're going to need some sort of tube. Let's try with a nozzle from my Rework station. Install it where the spring should be. So first I'm going to loosely install the spring, and then I'm going to use the nozzle from the Rework station and put it on top of the spring. And then we need something thin enough to fit inside the nozzle here. Let's try with a cut Q-tip. And then I'm just going to push that spring down quite firmly. Now let's see if it's stuck to the flapper. I think it is. Let's install a keycap and see if this works. Yeah, it totally worked. Awesome. That is way easier than doing a full bolt mod. Let's try with the original cap. Yeah, that totally works. That fixed it. So easy. Most of the keycaps on the Model M are two-piece caps, like this one. But we're also going to try out one-piece caps today. Well, that was an incredibly quick and easy fix. It took less than 5 minutes. Recording video included. Well, in that case, let's move on to the next keyboard. Next up we have the new old stock Model M that came with the famous IBM 7496 prototype. If this is all new to you, this machine is one of 9 mystery machines found at Computer Reset a few years ago. It's still a mystery what these machines are. They are built with a mix of IBM parts, modified standard parts and custom parts. They have IBM part numbers and serial numbers, so they are some sort of prototypes or concept machines. Some of the parts were very expensive, but the fit and finish is pretty poor, so not likely custom machines. I made a repair video a couple of years ago where we managed to fix it by replacing 2 bad and 1 marginal chip and a few bad caps. However, when I tried to use it, it turned out to have yet another fault. Unfortunately, I've not been able to force that fault consistently, so that's why I haven't been able to do a second repair video. I'll keep testing it occasionally until I can figure out how to force that fault, and then we'll do a new repair video. By the way, if you know how to push an 8086 system to its limits, I'd love to try that out, to see if it will reveal the problem. I'll leave all the speculations and guesswork about this mystery IBM to you guys, and instead I'll move on to the included Model M in this video. Before we continue, I'd like to say thank you to PCB for sponsoring this video. I have been using their PCBs for years now, and I'm really happy with the level of service and the quality of these PCBs. This is just a few of the projects we have built on this channel. So head over to PCBWay.com and order some PCBs for your next project. Thank you PCBWay for supporting this channel. The box has a sticker with chip number 1393272, but hopefully it has a proper part number on the keyboard. It also has a date here, 31st of March 1988, and it's manufactured in plant J1. Let's pull that thing out of its box. And we immediately see signs of the issue with this keyboard. The tape was already cut when I got the keyboard, so someone else had a peek inside. Now this is quite a sight if you're into Model M's. It obviously looks brand new, since it has never been used. And incredibly enough, it still smells freshly molded plastics. A couple of things I found at Computer Reset smelled pretty badly, but not this keyboard. It has been really well preserved. It was obviously in this original box, but then it was also inside another box together with 7496. But unfortunately it is broken, so by tilting the keyboard we can clearly hear what the problem is. It's completely filled up with broken off plastic rivets. Inside the box we have a few more rivets and original cable, of course. It seems to have been stuck to the styrofoam I'm gonna have to clean that off and put this cord in a bag. It's sort of like a museum piece, so I'm not going to use it unless I make a video or test something with a 7496. At the back it has a sticker with proper part numbers, and as expected, this is a 139-1401, probably the most common Model M. I have not been inside this keyboard yet, but I can already see through the speaker grill that this is a Gen 2 or later keyboard, because it has a plain steel backplate. Gen 1 keyboards had brass-colored backplates, like this one here. So it's quite easy to spot through the speaker grill. Not that it matters much. Any Model M is a million times better than any other keyboard. Perhaps with the exception of the Model F. The Model F is nicer to type on, but if you also consider the layouts, the Model M is actually the better choice. At least if you're going to use it as your daily driver. Okay, let's lift that cover off and see how bad this is. Wow, that is an unusual sight. There is not a speck of dust inside here, of course. And more broken off plastic rivets. The flat flex here reveals that this is a Gen 2 keyboard too. Gen 1 keyboards had a yellow ribbon cable instead. So let's pull that thing off. Model M's were made in millions. So you can actually still occasionally find new old stock keyboards on eBay. Next we need to disconnect the flat flex from the controller. And we've got more plastic rivets. Tons of them. I have repaired a few of these, but I have never seen this many broken off rivets. With that many rivets broken off, this keyboard is obviously not working. That's why we're doing the bolt mod on this keyboard. So the fragile part in any Model M is the barrel plate. As long as it's stuck to the back plate, it's very strong. But as soon as we remove it, it's going to be very fragile, and it cracks very easily. For that reason, I like to remove the keycaps first, even though it exposes all the springs, because once the barrel plate is removed, I don't want to use any force by removing the keycaps. Removing the keycaps is very easy with a tool like this. You can find one of these on eBay for next to nothing. These are two-piece caps, so if you're restoring a Model M, you would take them apart and clean them separately. In this case, no cleaning is needed. Okay, this must be a very early Gen 2 keyboard, or a very late Gen 1 keyboard, because the barrel plate is Gen 1, and the back plate is Gen 2. It's very easy to spot, even without disassembling the keyboard, because Gen 1 has these stabilizers. Let me see if I can find the Gen 2 cap. Okay, here's a Gen 2 enter key. As you can see, it doesn't have the stabilizer here. Instead it has an insert in this barrel here. So this keyboard seems to be a mix of the two. Rivets are just falling off as I go here. They are so fragile, they're just falling off. Okay, all the keycaps are off. But we can't just turn it upside down, because then we will damage all these springs. One way to protect it is to use pool noodles and upper part of a case, and then I can rest the assembly inside the case. Oh wow, that is a lot of broken off rivets. I think more than half of them are broken off. Yeah, there are only 4 tabs left. No, actually not, just 3 of them on this half of the barrel plate. We also have what looks like blood here. So someone got hurt assembling this keyboard. But it was tested by SHA, and the final inspection was made by DJ. So maybe one of these guys had to sacrifice some blood to assemble this Model M. The next step is to remove what's left of these rivets. Yeah, this one was just completely loose too. Yeah, I don't even have to pry. Okay, here's one that is actually stuck. It's easily done with a box cutter. Just pull it off. There's no need to cut. They tend to come off just by pulling on them. Okay, all the rivets are out, but most likely the barrel plate is still stuck to the back plate. As I mentioned before, the barrel plate is very fragile, so don't try to pry it off. Instead, I'll start at one end and push on what's left of those rivets. That should make the barrel plates unstuck. Okay, I think it's unstuck now. But the mat inside can sometimes be a bit sticky. There you go. This is so weird. Everything's so clean. The next step is to remove the mylar sheet. It can be stuck to some of these rivets. In that case, you need to snip them off. Under the mylar sheet there is a rubber mat. Same thing here. You may have to snip some of these rivets off to be able to remove the mat. Okay, and the rubber mat is off. Yeah, this is definitely a Gen 1 barrel plate. You can tell by these plastic tubes on the side here. The next step is to take note of barrels without flappers. In this case we only have one down here. And these two barrels here. If you don't like to memorize things, mark them with a pen. With those barrels marked, you can now remove all the flappers. This is normally where you would start cleaning everything and leave it to dry. But in this case, nothing needs cleaning. I'll mention it a third time. The barrel plate is fragile and easily cracks. So I'm not going to push on the barrel plate when it's laying flat like this. Instead, I'm going to use pool noodles. And the next step is to remove what's left of all those rivets. This step is not strictly necessary, but I like to mark all the broken off rivets. I find it slightly easier to drill the holes later. As I mark the rivets, I also inspect them and make sure they have a flat enough surface to drill. If they don't, I just use a knife and cut them nice and flush. The barrel plate has a minor damage. There's a piece broken off here and in one other spot, but I think it's enough left of it so we can drill a hole through here. So I think we're okay. You will most likely find a couple of rivets underneath the sticker, so you need to remove the sticker to get access to these holes. The way I do this, I can put the sticker back on. To drill the holes, I use a Dremel in a workstation. The workstation is not strictly necessary, but it's actually not very expensive, and it makes the job much easier. Okay, let's start drilling those rivets. I still use the pool noodle underneath the barrel plate to avoid damaging it. I use a 1.5mm drill for the screws I've got. And here's our damaged rivet. Yeah, I think it went okay. This is the other damaged rivet. I think it's going to be okay too. But if you find a rivet that is beyond repair, just pick one of these spots nearby, drill a corresponding hole in the back plates, and install a screw here, or in this position here. Okay, all the holes are drilled, and here's the result. So perhaps now you can see why I like to mark the rivets. This way it's much easier to drill the hole perfectly centered. The damaged rivet in the middle of the keyboard here looks pretty okay too. I think it's still usable. Before we can reinstall all the flappers, we need to raise the barrel plate off the bench. I used the same method as before. And now we can install all the flappers. I like to mark the damaged rivets, that way I remember to be extra careful when I install screws later. If you have a Gen 1 board, you also need to remember to put these tubes back in. One tube on this side and two smaller tubes on the other side. Next up we have the rubber mats. This rubber mat smells like a keyboard factory. Now we can put the mylar sheet back on. It's obviously very important to get them perfectly aligned. I'm not sure why, but some Model M's have the mylar sheet glued to the back plates. It makes the restoration slightly easier. Okay, now we can carefully put the back plate on. Make sure it's perfectly aligned, and then start installing screws. And these are the screws I'm using. I've had this bag for years, so I don't quite remember what they are, but I'll see if I can find some information and put it on the screen here. I'd like to start by installing one screw on each corner and leave them loose for now. And then I install screws in the middle. The important thing here is not to over tighten these screws. If you do, the barrel plate will crack. So if you're unsure, just leave them loose for now. You can always tighten them some more after your first test. Okay, that was the last screw. On this side of the keyboard there are tiny dots where all the screws are. So compared to the bolt mod, this is the much better looking option. Okay, controller connected to the keyboard. If you don't have a PS2 connector, you can find one of these adapters on eBay. And then I'm going to install a few keycaps to see if it works. I'm using a random keyboard tester online. Yes, it totally works. Awesome. I'll test a few. Yes, this keyboard totally works. So I'll put all the keycaps back on. Okay, all the keys are back on and tested. But now that the keyboard works, it actually revealed a fault here. So something is wrong here with F11 or F12. They kind of get stuck in each other. As I mentioned before, I'm not really going to use this keyboard. So I could just leave it like this. This is not a big issue. But let's do quick tests. How about if they switch places? Yeah, that was actually enough to fix the problem. By the way, if you have a faulty keycap on your Model M, they are quite easily found on eBay. The controller back here is just jammed. I almost forgot the ground cable. Before I screw the screws in, I turn them anti-clockwise until they make a clicky noise. That way I know the screw is back in its original thread and won't damage the case. So there you have it, one fully working screw-modded Model M keyboard for the 7496. Sometimes I'm a bit too trigger happy on eBay, so sorry to all my Spanish typing viewers, I managed to snatch one of your keyboards. I wasn't paying attention. I don't speak or type in Spanish, so I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's Spanish. The question mark here is upside down, and then it has these two legends here. They look very Spanish to me. And instead of enter, it has intro. I could of course just throw it back out on eBay, but I didn't. Instead I bought a full set of keycaps from Unicomp. So let's try these out instead. Most keycaps on the Model M are two-piece caps like this one here. But this set here has mostly one-piece caps like the Model F. The enter key for the numpad here reveals that this set is for Gen 2 keyboards. I thought it'd be interesting to try these out and compare them with the original keycaps. I'm gonna skip ahead here not to repeat myself, but I can see through the grill here that this is a Gen 1 keyboard. At least the backplate. Let's take a look inside. Oh, that's clean. That is a very clean keyboard. And sure enough, the backplate is Gen 1. But these LEDs are actually Gen 2. And the barrel plate too is Gen 1. So, Spanish or not, this was an excellent buy. This is a very clean keyboard, but unfortunately a few loose rivets. Yeah, it's a Gen 1 backplate for sure, but it looks different from my other backplates. The ground cable is Gen 1 too, but the controller and the LED panel is Gen 2. Manufacturing date is November of 1988, so not too far off from the other keyboard. Well, it's only missing 7 rivets, so how about we try something new and repair this keyboard without making a full screw mod. After all, this is most likely what you will find inside your keyboard. A few missing rivets, but far from all of them will be bad. I gently pulled on all the remaining rivets, and a few more came off. I'd say about 15 in total. I'll drill some holes and skip ahead here. Okay, said and done. Let's install some screws. Instead of those 15 missing rivets. Yes, I think this is working. This is definitely a good option if you're only missing a few rivets. Well, I thought this was too good to be true, and it was. All the keys with removed keycaps are not working. And secondly, this and this flapper here have crushed springs. So we're not getting away quite that easily. Well, let's turn this into a fun project and see if we can make an ISO mod. I'll remove all the rivets, drill the holes and skip ahead here. What a weird keyboard. Look at how clean it is. I don't think this keyboard is used, but it has been thrown around quite a bit. Enough to crush 2 of the springs. And then it has been stored really well for decades. What a weird combination. One of the inserts fell off while I was drilling the holes. It must be for the left shift key. But we also need to install 2 extra on this side here, because this is the old enter key and here is our new enter key. So that means we are going to need an insert in this barrel here. I'll push it down later. I don't want to stress the barrel plates since it's laying flat on the bench. But then we have something weird going on here, because this is the old shift key, but the insert is missing in this barrel here. So that's a bit strange. And here's the new shift key. It definitely needs an insert. Well, this keyboard was obviously dropped, since 2 of the springs were crushed. So maybe that's why this insert was missing. Well, unfortunately I don't have enough spare inserts. So I'm gonna reuse the Spanish intro key. And this one is identical. So I'm gonna go with the Gen 1 key for the numpad plus. I guess I'll order some more inserts and fix it later. Or maybe I'll just keep it like this. Who doesn't need an intro? I make intros every week. And now I have a key for it. I had a look at the Mylar sheets. I can't say for sure this is going to work. But at least it seems to have pads for both types of enter keys. So I think this is going to work. Let's find out. I went through all the flappers and ended up replacing 6 of them. I put them all in one spot here. It's easier to remember this way if I notice a difference. I think I got these from Unicomp many years ago, but I can't quite remember. I thought I'd try to explain how I tighten these screws, but it's really difficult. You sort of get a feel for it after a while. I think the best I can do is to say that I screw them all the way in, but I don't really tighten them the way you normally would with a screw. So I guess go for slightly too loose. If you leave them too loose, you're not going to damage anything. But if you tighten them too hard, you will damage the barrel plates. Unfortunately, I think that's my best explanation. Well, anyways, one Spanish keyboard, fully screw modded. Well, not so Spanish anymore, I guess. I remember that the space key wasn't included in that kit, but I can't remember if it was missing any other keys, so I'm gonna reuse the space bar, and I guess we'll find out in a minute. Let's see if our new shift key fits. I think it does. Now, how about the enter key? Yeah, that totally works. I just googled. Apparently there are 550 million Spanish-speaking people in the world. I better hide after I upload this video. Okay, all the keycaps were included except for the spacebar. And I'm not going to use the included Gen 2 keys for the numpad. Instead I'm going to reuse my new intro key. Okay, time for a test. Sorry, I'm not going to capture the display on the PC because I'm running really late. I should have uploaded by now, and I'm still not finished with the video. Okay, let's test some random keys. Yes, all the keys on the numpad works. Now let's try the enter key. Yes, it works. And the shift. Yes, this totally works. So the only difference between the two keyboards is actually just the keycaps and a couple of inserts. so these can be modified very easily in both directions. And this keyboard feels amazing. Now that it's bolt modded and brand new keycaps. I noticed when I installed these keycaps that I had to use slightly more force than I usually would with a regular Model M. But I think that's a good thing, because they move really easily and they feel really solid. If I wash the original case and leave it to dry, I won't be able to upload on time. So I'm going to borrow this case here. The original case has a different badge. I have a spare, but I'm not sure I should replace it. Yeah, I think I'm going to keep it like this. It makes it more interesting. Well, I just typed very briefly on this keyboard, and it feels amazing. I can't really tell from a quick test like this if there is any difference compared to the original keycaps. But I can tell you for sure, they are really good. So, this is going to be my new daily driver. Well, if this is going to be my daily driver, I'm going to use it to try out some colorful keycaps. So these blue caps are two-piece caps without legends. So I'm going to reuse the plungers and use them as arrow keys. Yeah, that looks pretty good. The escape key in red is a one-piece cap. Yeah, that looks pretty good. I think too many colored keycaps is going to look silly, but with a few caps like this, it looks pretty good. So if you're joining me in the live chat, this is what I'm typing on. Well, I don't know how much of this is nostalgia, but I really enjoy typing on these keyboards. I use them for most of my vintage stuff and for all my modern stuff too. I'm not sure if I should recommend getting one though. It's a pretty deep rabbit hole, and as you have seen in this video, it takes some work to keep them running. If you haven't seen my video restoring the Model F XT and the Model F AT, now is a good time to catch up. I will end by saying thank you to my patrons. I appreciate your support. If you want to support me too, consider becoming a patron. Patrons get ad-free early access. If you like this video, let me know with a thumbs up in the comments. If you're a regular viewer, consider subscribing to this channel. Thank you for watching, I'll see you next week.